All right, welcome everybody. Here we are for our third CSBA sustainability chat. It is February, gosh, I don't even know what day it is. It is Monday, February 17th. I don't know, the middle of February. Here we are getting ready for spring. We can kind of linger on the tough news that's going on in the beekeeping industry right now, or we can look forward to spring and all the fun, great things we have going on in spring. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. We have a great guest speaker tonight. We have Greg Burns from Nature's Image Farm. Nature's Image Farm is a gosh, I'm not sure if I would call you sideline or commercial. You guys run a couple hundred colonies in Ohio. You sell queens, you sell nukes, you sell packages, you sell beekeeping equipment, you sell education, and just general life advice you can get at Nature's Image Farm. Great local resource for the Colorado area. Sorry, for the Ohio area, and really anyone that's gotten to know Greg or his family. A great family run business in the beekeeping industry. We are excited to have you here tonight, Greg. Welcome. We're here to learn from you and your experiences with raising queens.
Awesome. Well,
All
Brian
right.
and crew, thanks for the invite. I love talking about things that I'm passionate about, especially in a format like this, because it's a little bit different than getting up in front of X amount of people. We can kind of cruise through a lot of information and kind of customize tonight's discussion based on how folks want to participate, what questions that they may have. But I'm really excited to talk tonight about queen rearing the easy way, and I wanted to kind of share some thoughts and some ideas, and get folks pumped up about raising their own queens. Everybody can do it, and just because that we do it for a living doesn't mean that you can't do it for fun. That you can't also do it for a little bit of side cash too. But most importantly, I just want to kind of share this journey, and a lot of these things are built on learning the hard way, and I kind of wanted to share that in tonight's presentation, and then maybe open up the end after the presentation to a Q&A for all things queens or bees related. How's that sound, Brian?
That sounds perfect. You've got a presentation for us.
Let's see if we can get that to
Awesome.
go.
And then, like Greg said, if you have questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll hit them at the end of the presentation.
Okay, Brian, what do you see on your screen there?
I see your screen and then your head to the side of it. So now you're getting ready to click play. Now I see queen rearing the easy way.
Okay,
And yeah,
good deal. Well, yeah, so again, thanks. I'm excited. Queen rearing the easy way. When you think about rearing queens, I think a lot of folks they're excited about it. It's something that it's like a beekeeper's bucket list thing to do. Sometimes folks never get around to doing it, and I'll just be the first one to say, um, rearing queens, seeing that queen emerge from that cell in that very first time, emerge out of that cell, be greeted by the colony. That is so powerful and so beautiful, that the next generations are born right then and there. I love it. Out of all the things that we do on the farm pertaining to bees, queen rearing is just that thing for me. I could spend days and weeks and months going on and on and on. So I'm going to try to keep my thoughts semi constrained to this 45-minute to an hour time block of kind of sharing some of these things with you folks. But I think when a lot of folks think of queen rearing, one of the first things that they do is they automatically go to the most difficult or most challenging thing first, because sometimes it just looks really cool, right? You look to the left here, and this is an Apis Engineering Queen Station. This is a piece of equipment that we use for artificial insemination, and it looks impressive, and it looks a little bit scary. It looks challenging, and it looks like if somebody has one of those, they probably know what they're doing. On the right hand side, or my right, we've got a beautiful black Caucasian queen with number 25 marked on her thorax there. A lot of folks, these are things that they dream of. These are things that they think about. These are things that they want to achieve, and for good reason. before we get going, I always want to make sure that I cover this really important thing that not only we stand for, we believe in, it's a part of what we do, whether it's raising queens, raising a family, or building a community. If you know our YouTube channel or our podcast at Nature's Image Farm, or you spent time with us on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m., either on the Bruce's Bees channel or the Castle Hives channel or our channel, you will have heard us over the years say the phrase hashtag be the lighthouse. And there are so many incredible folks and people that come into our life that is just so special. We say it all the time, bees are the conduit to the people. Beekeeping is something that we actually feel called to do, that it's our responsibility with the time that we have on earth to make a difference in the beekeeping community, but also the community at large. So I like to just, this is kind of, for me, just a fun reminder. Upper left-hand corner is me and my wife a couple years back at one of the package pickups, and my wife, she's my everything. Behind every good man's an even better woman, and she is just she is so special to me. And on the bottom right-hand corner, you can kind of see Susan, my wife, and I, and our 7 kids. That's it. I said 7. Yes, they're all mine. And Luke and Lily, number 6 and 7, they were kind of a buy one get one free. They're at the end. So we have a quiver full. God's blessed us, and just this whole entire journey. Maybe some other time I'll talk to you about that, how we actually got started, because it's not conventional, and it wasn't a straight, narrow, easy road. And I'd like to share that story with you sometime too. A top center, one of the most beautiful things, bees are the conduit to the people. Top center of this photo here is a photo from the learning yard right here at Nature's Image Farm. One of the things that we do different, yes, we sell packages and nukes and queens, and you would think with for folks who sell bees, they would want to sell bees to people every single year. Well, we kind of have a different philosophy. We want to sell beekeepers bees once, and then we want to help them that entire first year get off to a good start so that their bees make it, their bees live, their bees make it through the wintertime. And then when they come back and see us in the spring, it's because they need more equipment to make splits. Or maybe they're growing out their apiary, and they're adding new colonies there. So one of the things that we do is free for our bee customers and military veterans is we make sure that we're there for them. We meet them where they're at, and we help them their first year be as successful as possible. So that's the learning yard. Just a beautiful little snapshot there. On the right hand side, you know a lot of those rascals there. But I actually just put a video out with Bob Benny, kind of talking about some of the current colony collapse situation there. But this photo here, just the time that I've spent with Bob, I could spend so much time talking about that. But Bob and his crew were just an extraordinary lighthouse to us for so many different ways. But Bob's a great example of what it means to be the lighthouse. He helps so many folks get off to a good path. Bottom left-hand corner, a beautiful opportunity. If you're not familiar with the Hives for Heroes program, this is a beautiful example of what can happen. The beekeeper there on the right-hand side holding that frame was one of my very first mentees or newbies. It was a gentleman that came in that I just helped, just was there for him, answer questions, help him get off to a good start, and he just took right off with it. What's so beautiful about that photo is that is now on the right-hand side was one of my mentees is now a mentor mentoring the next round of military veterans coming into beekeeping. And that right there, that is really what it's all about. You spend the time, help one person out so they can do it and pay that forward, be a lighthouse, pass the torch. That to me, that is really, really special. And so I just wanted to take a minute just to kind of just share some of the things in my life that are really important to me to help kind of paint just a little bit of context. Context is key. If you've heard our podcast or any of the videos, you would have heard me just kind of beat this phrase to death Context is key, and it is so important. When we talk about raising bees or feeding bees or making splits or rearing queens, the way we go about doing that is so context specific, and it is very hard to relay all the nuance of specifically what our context is, what our scale is, what our goals are, how those change from month to month, year to year. It's very difficult to have all that information kind of come through as you are learning or picking up pieces of information for other folks. So I just wanted to kind of briefly set the stage here. Brian did a great job of on the introduction. There is we try to keep it under about 400 colonies every year, and what our main focus with our bees is raising nukes and raising queens. And yes, we do keep colonies in production for honey. And the funny story with that is it's primarily because we have 7 kids. We were kind of old fashioned folks. We homeschool. We live a simple life, and if you can imagine being my wife, being involved in the homeschool community here locally, I think she got a little bit tired of the ladies asking her for honey, and when she would say no for so many years, because all of the honey we made was constantly going into making splits and growth and just moving. And so she eventually she said, "Honey, the ladies, they're constantly asking me for honey, and they say, how can you have hundreds of hives? We see them. How can you have hundreds of hives, but you don't have any honey for sale?" And so I said, all right, I'm gonna fix that for you. So we started earmarking little yards for her just so we can pull honey off to sell. It's important for us to kind of trial our breeders and see what our stock does as far as making honey goes. But our main focus is spending the time with genetics, raising queen bees. We raise, and we're a small outfit in the grand scheme of all of this. We're a very small outfit. We raise between 1,500 and 2,000 queens a year, and that is an enormous undertaking. I don't think a lot of folks, I don't think fully understand what it takes to even raise 500 queens. Mated queens in a year is an enormous undertaking. But that's where our niche is. That's what gets me excited every morning. Built cell building and cell finishers and grafting and genetics and trying to keep track of all this and seeing what these genetics do, see what these queens do out west and the northeast, down south. To me, that's kind of what pumps me up. So that's kind of what our context is. No more than a couple thousand queens a year. We raise about 400 colonies a year, but our primary focus is on nukes and queens. And then also a lot of folks will know us from the Endura Hive wax dipped line of equipment, Nature's Image Farm. We have a supply shop online and also brick and mortar. So a lot of folks know us through wax dipped equipment. They know us through our work with in collaboration with Premier Bee Products and the Propola line of equipment. Folks have seen us on the stream team. They know us through the Premier frames, Queen Right dial, bucket feeders. Everybody has just a little different way that they find us, but these are kind of some of the main things. So we're focused on the highest quality, not just the highest quality queens and genetics, but the highest quality products on the market there too. I started going through some of the photos today, and it really quickly started to become more of like a show and tell. And I'm thinking, Brian was so gracious to extend an invite out to come about queen rearing. I started just going through a bunch of fun and cool photos, and I realized like this is not really like it can't be a show and tell tonight. But I did want to give you guys just a quick sense of kind of the landscape where God has blessed us with the opportunity to raise bees, and so this is just one of my favorite yards here. So many things I learned. Sometimes you look at a picture and it says a gazillion words to you because there were so many fun things happening in this yard. Fritz, the German short-haired pointer, who knows what that rascal was pointing at, but he saw something. But I just wanted to point you guys in the right direction of here's kind of what our landscape looks like. Here was a really fun hive. It actually grew even taller than that last year. You guys might have seen the Monster Hive videos or heard about that saga, but that was such a incredible opportunity to get drone material and raise queens out of that colony. And that's a whole other conversation for a different day. Go back to our YouTube channel and check out those monster hive videos. You can kind of learn more what that's about. And then here's just a couple more photos. You know, here, this is my vibe. This is my happy place. This is what I see every day. This is the kind of landscape and textures and colors and sounds, things that am so blessed to work with every single day. Back here's an old bank barn built in 1901, an old German couple. They came to this area. They actually built a little chicken coop further up the hill. They lived in that while they built this barn. And then they had a dairy here in the 1901 to like 1910, 1912 time frame. So a lot of beautiful history in this area. We're elevation, we're about maybe 1,100 feet at the highest. We're in the Flint Ridge area. Our road is actually Flint Ridge. And so what's beautiful about that, we are in the little town of Hopewell, referring to the Hopewell Indians or the Hopewell Mound people, and beautiful history in this area of a lot of the native tribes. This was kind of trading and neutral ground. They could come from near and far to trade and also gather flint. Just a really neat historical, kind of an ancient, beautiful area. So that's kind of what I'm. Some of the scenes that I see here. Sometimes when you hear folks talk about raising queens and things like that, you don't really get to see the landscape in which they work within. So I kind of wanted to share just a couple of those photos with you. As we get going, you guys, if you've spent any time with us at all, you kind of know a lot of some of our philosophy in life and how we look at things. But I do want to make it really clear that, in my opinion, there is no right way or wrong way. There's only the way that works for you and the bees and your context. And as we just mentioned, context is key. That's going to be different for everybody. Your context, your scale, your goals, and your relationship with the bees. And sometimes that is ever changing. So how hard can it really be? You know, I mean, with raising queens, you know, a lot of folks have different experiences with it. They have different challenges. They have different concerns. But just quickly, you know, a couple of these. The biggest challenge for me was and still is selecting the right age larvae. That's a very common one. Mr. Larry Lee's bees there, he says the toughest part of queen rearing for me was actually getting the larvae and enough royal jelly into the cups. That's a big one. Kevin K.A. Plant at the bottom there, that comment says using the grafting tool and learning the touch. And we could go on and on and on. You know, I'll ask you, you know, what are some of the things that you find are either discouraging or challenges or are limiting factors that's preventing you from rearing queens? One of the things that we get every single year, and it'll start here in the next week, is we'll have brand new beginning beekeepers, and they'll reach out and they've just ordered their first package of bees or their first nuke or their first hive kit with bees in it, and they don't even have the bees yet. They've made the order, and they'll call and they'll say, "Hey, Greg, this is Mike. I just ordered bees. I'm really excited. I've got some questions for you." And I'll say, "Okay, well, shoot." And they'll say, "Hey, what's the best grafting tool? What's the best cell starter? What's the best way to make queens?" And they're like, they don't even have their bees yet. So a lot of folks are really can get really excited and they really want to get all into this thing, right? But there are some things that have to happen, and they have to happen in a very specific manner, or the whole thing, all the wheels kind of fall off the bus. There are some challenges with beekeeping, and we'll talk a little bit about that. This is me speaking to me because one of the things that happens very often with beekeeping, especially the third year, is we want to get into raising bees. We want to get into making these queens. We watch the videos, we listen to the Zooms, we read the books, and all of a sudden we feel like, oh, we know it all. I mean, we just get right in there. And sometimes we get a little too proud. And this is me speaking to myself. But I love the old scripture that says, pride comes before a fall. Proverbs 11:2. A lot of times I think if we stay a little bit more humble with our walk, even as we're learning, and just know that the more we learn, the less we know, that is the next 20 years of your beekeeping journey, and that's okay. We are never going to know all the things. We're never going to figure all the things out. And there is a certain amount of wisdom that comes when we are humble with that walk. And believe me, I have learned that one the hard way. So I'll ask you guys here the question, who, and I don't know, Brian, I don't know if I don't really have a way, I don't think, to see hands being raised. So imagine this, imagine we're in the same room right now, and I'll ask you all the question, so who listening tonight, um, and who would like to raise, let's say, 5 queens this year, right? Just, the virtual raise your hand. Okay. Who would like to raise 30 queens this year? Okay. If hands go up. Who would like to raise 5 queens every week? Okay. Hands will start to go up. And then I'll ask the question, how many folks would like to raise 10 queens a week? And then the hands usually start to drop down, and I'll ask, okay, who wants to raise more than 20 or 30 queens a week? And there's always going to be some folks in there. There's always going to be somebody, and I can help you with that. But for everybody else who just wants to raise 5 to 30 queens in the entire year, or they want to raise 20 queens or less every single week, I've got some things that I want to share with you to help you be successful. No matter if you want to raise 1 queen, like this beautiful Pepto Pink queen on the upper right hand corner, or you want to raise 100 that ship out every week. I want to share some of the hard lessons learned and how we can make queen rearing really, really easy. Timing is everything. I think we all know and understand that. There are a couple really great tools to help you with your queen rearing timing. Everything is very time sensitive. There's very little room for error when it comes into grafting and making queens. There's very little room for error, but timing is everything. What you'll see is 2 pieces of equipment that I use myself. One of them is the Hamby Queen, the Queen dial, and also the Queen Right dial. Both are fantastic. I like the Queen Right dial. It's a small little unit that it can fit in your hand, it can fit in your pocket. Take it out in your bee yard with you, and that works out really good. And what you do is you start the numbers on the outside of this dial that correspond to the calendar days of the year. So let's say today was April 1st, or let's say it's May 1st, a little further to the season. You guys in Colorado, I'm not even really sure, maybe mid-May, or let's just say June 1st, you decide to start raising your queens. You would turn this dial where it says graft to that first day of that month. And then you'll start to see all the things that happen from there on out in that queen cycle follow the calendar cycle. And so it's a very helpful and handy tool to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to, or more importantly, know what is actually going on with that queen in that time frame. So what we're going to do is I'm going to kind of briefly kind of take you on a little journey through some of the most important timestamps when it comes to queen rearing. So we're going to refer to grafting day as day 1. Okay, this has nothing to do with the calendar day, but this is the beekeeper day. So beekeeper day 1. When we talk about grafting day, this is the day that we're actually going to start grafting. So the graft day, we're going to call day 1. And so outside of the goober on the left with the headlamp, I've done this so many different ways for so many different years. But just kind of quickly, what you'll see here, if you're not familiar with some of this equipment, in my mouth, that is a Chinese grafting tool, and it's a very common tool used for grafting to kind of delicately remove the larvae and the royal jelly bed from the actual cell in the brood chamber, and then gently remove that and then place it into these cell cups. And you'll see here, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So 15 times 15. We typically go between 180, 195, upwards of 200 and some grafts at a time. We like to make it count when we do it. And so for the number of queens that we raise every single year, we try to do at least 200 queens every single week. And so what you'll see here are some wood sidebars with the JZBZ cups that we use. I really like the JZBZ cups. I like the I just I love wood too, but we also use the plastic JZBZ cell bars. On the right hand side, you'll see just a kind of a basic standard kind of grafting table where the grafting material can go onto that little bench, and then we can kind of use and manipulate and get in and do the things that we need to do there. So grafting day, day one, and this is one of the first, I would say, opportunities for folks who are just getting into beekeeping to do better with. As you look on the right hand side, you'll see all of the different. There's very different ages of larvae here, and I'll ask you to just disregard those goofy arrows. I didn't see those there, and when I put that together there, but kind of look at that larvae there, and if based on what you know so far with queen rearing, I'll ask you just look around at those and kind of, which one would you go after? Which one would you pick? It's not just as easy as going right in there, digging in and grabbing every single one that you can happen to get on your tool. Believe it or not, it makes a huge difference. Nearly everything that you see going up for where it says EnduraHive wax dipped, if we call that first row of cells row one, and then as we go up, we'll row two, row three, row four, row five, row six, row seven. As you go up, nothing in row one, row two, row three, row four. There's one in row five that's acceptable. But when you get into row six, that's where you start to get into the right size of larvae. If you can see it, in my opinion, if you can see it, it's too big. What I'm actually looking for is kind of the clarity and the amount of the royal jelly puddle that's in the bottom of the cell. You'll also know when you start using your grafting tool that those big ones, it might seem productive because you can get a big honking larvae on the end of your tool, but those are not the right size. Those are actually much too old. I tend to go for somewhere in that 12 to 24 hour time frame after hatching, what has gone from egg into that first larvae phase. And so for me, if we were to say row one, two, three, four, five, row six, which would be the second row from the very top as you come down, it would be on my right. You can kind of see some amberish color cells. There's one, there's another to the left, and then that next one over. You can see larvae that is just forming into that C shape. For me, that's about the time frame that we go into. So if you can see it, in my opinion, it's too big. You want to go for those ones that are so small that when you'll learn to use either bifocal readers, a magnifying lens, kind of a retractable magnifying lens that you can kind of attach to your bench. Obviously a nice headlamp. You'll notice that you don't actually, when they're the right age, you don't really see the outline of the larvae at all. What you actually see is the little dots, and that's it. You can kind of see as the light is shining off of the larvae, you can see all the little white polka dots going up and down their, that center part of the larvae. But if you'll notice, you can actually also see their shape. Once they get so small, when they're the right age, in my opinion, they're so small, I have a hard time seeing their actual body shape. I can just see the shape of that very gentle C, letter C, just barely being shaped. It's going from almost a flat line into just curling over. And when that's just right, you don't see the outline of the larvae body. You just see the little dots. I know it's a really hard thing to comprehend or understand if you've never actually looked at it. But if you get into grafting this year or next year, then maybe that little descriptor will kind of just cue back into your mind, and you'll say, "Oh, well, that's what he meant there." So day one, we're grafting, we're selecting the right larvae, and if it's too big, if you can see it, in my opinion, it's too big. So we've now grafted. On the left-hand side, you'll see a wood cell barter. That's a homemade cell bar, just using some scrap frame pieces. And then you'll see the JZBZ cell bars along with the the cups, and those everything is grafted on those. That's 45 grafts per frame there. And this next step, you you can go so many different ways. I'm going to share a couple really easy ways that you can kind of achieve this same goal. But so we've grafted. It's day number one. Now we have to place these cells. Once we've grafted the correct age, we have to make sure that we didn't flip them over on accident. We have to make sure that we didn't smash them with the end of the tool. We have to make sure that we actually got them in the bottom of the cell. We actually also have to make sure that there was enough moisture in that time frame that they didn't dry out already too. There's a lot of very sensitive things that we have to do even up to this point on placing our frame into our cell builder. We could spend an entire Zoom meeting on talking about cell builders, but what I'll briefly say is the idea of a cell builder is we're introducing these grafts to a colony that are very hungry and ready to make queens. And there's several different ways that you can do that. Let me start with one of the easiest things that has worked so well for me is I'll go into a big colony that needs humbled. You know, they might be in double deeps and they are just getting they're all on the verge of starting to swarm. And hopefully they have even started some swarm cells. What I'll do is go through, check every single frame. I'll knock down single um, every single cell that they're working on, and then I'll go ahead and just move that queen. I'll take the queen out and I'll make a little nuke or a little side split with them. Okay. I'll come back 3 to 5 more days later because from that time that I move the queen, they're going to start building their own queens. They're going to start making queen cells, and I let them do that. I'll go back in there and knock all of those down. Okay. So on day one, when I'm ready to graft, I just take my frame and now I'm putting it into a colony that I've already previously made queenless. I've already also made sure and knocked down all of the queen cells. So at this point, this colony, they've been missing their queen for 3 to 5 days. They've been queenless. Anything old enough for them to make a queen off of, they've made that queen cell. I've knocked all those down. Now they have no future opportunity to make any replacement queen, but they're a big, beautiful, strong, healthy colony. Now I'll go ahead and just take my frame of grafts and drop that right inside of there, and they go to town. They do a beautiful job of drawing those out. That's one way to do it. Um, Another way, and there's multiple steps involved, and I don't want to confuse anybody, but a very solid, a very great way that we also do every single year. It's called a queenless starter, queen right finisher. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about that because it can get a little confusing if you're not familiar with grafting at all. So if you have specific questions about the queenless starter or queen right finisher, let's talk about that after we get done with this with these slides. But in short, we are manipulating double deeps in a way to where we are putting something called a double screen board right between them, where we're intentionally manipulating the colony so that one of those boxes feels as though they don't have a queen. What we do is we actually place our grafts into that box, let them get started making queens, and then we kind of flip the boxes, pull that double screen board out and put a queen excluder in its place and return them to a queen right situation. Now what that does is there's all of these cells that they have started based on our graphs. They've already started to do the work in that 24-hour period. When we reintroduce that queen back to it, they just keep going. They keep going with the full intensity and full production of everybody in double deeps. That whole entire colony is now committed to making queens because they've already started them in that 24-hour period. So that is one thing that we do. I call that flip and feed. I don't want to get lost in the weeds on that because, again, if you're not familiar with this part of it, it can get a little confusing. But one of the most important things, I do want to say this. When it comes to cell builders, you've got to have colonies that are just juiced up. that are fed up, that are just beautiful, robust, healthy colonies. They've got to be free of viruses. They can't be hungry at all. You nearly want them on the verge of swarming, but they have got to have all the nutrition in all the right places. Okay. You don't want to start putting grafted cells into a colony that doesn't have any stored pollen, that doesn't have any stored bee bread, that doesn't have any stored honey, because that colony has not developed and isn't nutritionally progressed enough where they have enough food to feed the babies. You want to work with cell builders that have everything that they need already to care for and to nurse those young ones. There's something beautiful that happens with the timing that bees know, where when you see bees naturally doing that, they are squared away and are ready to start down this path. But you can sometimes have colonies that may be in doubles or triples, or even double deeps with several supers, that something has happened along the way. There's been an interruption in health and an interruption in nutrition. And just because there's a lot of bees there doesn't mean that they are in a position to make really good cells or care for those young bees. We want the right age of bees in there. Now, here's what's interesting is I think as humans, we understand the concept of training ourselves out of a job, right? We want to be able to train or put somebody else in place that takes our job over, and we go on to the next thing. What's interesting about bees is as they progress and they hatch and now they're young nurse bees and they go through all of the chores of feeding and cleaning and eventually guard bees and then forage bees, those those bees can revert back to and do some of the things, those initial duties that they were delegated with early in their journey. They can revert back to that. Okay. And so you can certainly take a colony that doesn't have any nurse bees or young bees in it, and they will start to draw some cells, but they don't do it as well as those young nurse bees who have everything intact physically to be the ones producing the most amount of royal jelly. That's what these bees are really there for inside that colony, is to nurture and to nurse that next round. So it's important to make sure that we've got the right age bees in these cell starters for the highest quality queen cells. And so we can talk a lot more about that. But again, day one, we're grafting and placing those cells into a cell builder so those bees can start that process of feeding and nurturing that larvae so it can develop. They'll start to draw that cell and cap it on that second day. It's called flip and feed, and we can talk more about that here at the end. Here's a great example of what a healthy cell builder looks like. I can't think of which video it is. One of the videos on our channel, I'm pulling out cells, and you can kind of see this whole thing. But what I like is that when bees are just boiling out, they're all over the front. You crack open the lid, and it's just thick, covered of bees, and there are so many bees there. You ask yourself, "Oh my gosh, how in the world am I going to even get in there to pull a frame out?" Those are the colonies that make phenomenal cell starters. They can build all those cells and do all that work. They have such a tremendous population to do that. So here's a great example. Here's about what I see all the time. If I'm taking a second box off and taking a peek, you can also, there's nothing wrong with using singles as a cell builder as well. 5 frame nukes, as long as they are really, really fat and happy. Um, what you'll have to do is just cut back the number of cells that you're feeding them. I wouldn't feed a frame of 45 to a 5 frame nuke, but I wouldn't be afraid of feeding a cell bar of 15 to a really beautiful boiling over 5 frame nuke. No problem at all. Every year we start off on the conservative side, and we'll just put 1 frame of 45 into our cell builders, and we'll see how they do. If it's beautiful wax and we've got 80, 90% takes, then on that next week when I go back into that cell builder, I'll give them 90. I'll give them 2 of those frames and see what they do. And then they'll actually tell you as the season goes, hey, we don't have enough nutrition. Hey, we don't have enough nurse bees to do this, because you'll start to see your take rates will start to kind of diminish. So the bees can actually tell us a lot what we can actually get by with there. So when we get into day 6 of the beekeeper's process with grafting, at this point, we've already taken our cells, we've put it into the cell builder, and then on that day 6, the bees will cap all of those cells. And what I wanted to show you here is right now, like where this picture on the right is shot, it's in the old milk house of this bank barn, and it's just this was actually where there was an old uh, spring house, and up until last year, the spring actually still fed water into where the cans were cooled. So this is a really neat, just an old building, and I love grafting in there when I can. But what's neat about it is the old picture windows. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to kind of hold this frame of cells up to the light to be able to show the amount of royal jelly inside of those cells. Not a lot of folks have seen that. You've heard sometimes incorrectly that the larger the cell, the better the queen quality is. And that can actually get you. I've seen 2 and 3 inch queen cells before. And at first, when I first heard all those same things, I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be like super mega queen. She's going to be awesome. And you put that queen cell in, and then nothing happens. And you're thinking, what is going on? She should have been hatched already. And you tear the cell down, and what you'll find is those very long, those really big queen cells are actually ones where the pupae is dislodged from the royal jelly, and they just kept building jelly and jelly and jelly, and the whole thing is royal jelly. It's a great thing to keep and eat for a snack, but doesn't make any good queens. You can kind of see in some of these. I wish I had a laser pointer so I could kind of show you a little bit better, but I don't know if you can. You probably can't see. I don't have a mouse there. What I like is queen cells. When you look into these cups, you don't want the royal jelly to be full. When that royal jelly is completely full and you've got cap cells that are getting ready to hatch, that tells me that that queen didn't eat at all. She ate nothing of that royal jelly. If you actually were to grin that cell, meaning open that cell up in that time frame and actually look, you'll find a little tiny dead pupae that didn't develop. And that's why that entire cup is full of royal jelly. I kind of shoot for, I like to see about half of that cup have a little bit of jelly left in it. I don't have a picture here, but if you can imagine, if you were to flip this JZBZ cell over and look from the top down, it kind of has a little post, um, like a little calf feeding nipple, kind of a nipple shape on the top of that. When you look, there's 4 little quadrants. When you look down into there, if you see royal jelly, you're good. But if you're looking into the top of those cells and you see nothing, that means the pupae ate all of that. She ate all of that royal jelly. And to me, that leads to a queen who is more likely not to have the full nutrition for development. So I want a queen that is going in there. She has plenty to eat, and there's a little bit of leftovers. That's what I'm looking for. You can kind of see on some of these, the very top bar, um, a second from the left, fourth from the left. You can actually see the abdomen through um, through the that translucent green cup. And I could talk maybe another time about that. But one of the things that's very important for me is when we're making a couple hundred queens at a time, a couple hundred queen cells at a time, we'll actually do quality checks, and I'll call anything that is not going to be a winner. So anything that has too much jelly or no jelly, those get called out. Um, you can flick and take a little look inside of there and make sure that you actually see that developed abdomen. And when you get them like the day before they hatch, you can kind of see them twitch just a little bit. So it's a viability. It's like candling a chicken egg. We're candling queen cells to make sure that when we do put them out in the mating nukes or splits, that they're actually the viable ones. The worst thing in the world is to put bad queen cells out there, and you don't come back and check for 10 or 14 or 21 days, and now that little split is they don't have enough. They're so small they can't get with the program. Hive beetles can sometimes move in, so we want to make sure we've got a good population in the mating nuke and an actual viable queen cell. Because a lot of times what happens is if you put a bad queen cell in there, you may have had a beautiful population of bees, but they can sometimes drift and leave if there's nothing there for them to actually hold them to that box. So I hope that helps. That picture on the right, kind of being able to see into the queen cell a little bit. This picture on the left, this is a very hard lesson learned. This is why I wanted to put this in the presentation. I used an incubator like this for quite a few years and would always have troubles. I finally just had to bit the bullet and get a nice one that actually did the job well. As you can see here, this particular incubator, I had a very hard time keeping uniform temperature, even in that very small incubator. That's actually a reptile egg incubator. If you're only going to do 20 or 30 cells, I think it'll work fine. If you only need one of those shelves in there, you can probably get by. But I would have 2 to 5 degree differences on the shelves, and that is a major problem. I target for about 92.5 to 93.4, 93.5 or so is my target temperature. And I want to be somewhere in that 70 to 75% relative humidity inside of my incubator. That particular incubator, just the way it was built, the fan, it was hard to always keep up. And so it was very hard to keep the humidity where it needed to be. As you can see, that little thermometer in there is 45% humidity and 93.8 degrees. Um, it was just hard to dial that one in where I needed to. You could find a sweet spot and then just raise queen cells in that sweet spot. But you go above or below that thing, and it was just what happens is when the temperature varies, it alters the emerging rate. So you'll have queens that are hatching 12 hours prematurely or 12 hours late. Now, whether that is creating a biological variance or a quality variance could be. But when this is this approach here with grafting is very time specific. So this is day 6 in the beekeeper's calendar for grafting, and we are now taking these cells out of the cell starter, and they're going to go into the incubator, and they're going to go there uh, until they are almost ready to hatch. And the reason that I personally do that is if you leave all of these assets, all of these queen cells in that cell starter, in a queen right starter, they won't have that. They've got no reason to have 45 or 90 queen cells in there. They will start chewing down and destroying all of those, right? If you have a queenless cell starter and you leave all these cells in there, they'll pick the 2 or 3 that they prefer for whatever reason and tear everything else down. So you might say, well, isn't that good because they somehow know which ones are better than the rest? That's possible. But I honestly think that we're talking about if there is a potential for a 100% queen quality, I think when we get the queens this far, when they're almost ready to hatch, I think all the queens are going to be somewhere in that 95 to 100% queen quality as far as the potential of that virgin. But they may be able to see that 1 or 2% difference. Is that going to make a huge difference in your operation? Probably not. Is it worth letting the bees do the work? Yes. And we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. So that's kind of what day 6 looks like in the grafting calendar. We're pulling these cells out of the cell starter, and I am putting them into an incubator to protect my investment, to protect the asset, so they can keep developing, but we reduce the risk of the bees knocking all the extra ones down. The next important date in this journey is the day 10 and 11 for me. Now that again, that's 10, 11 of the beekeeper's calendar from when we're grafting. And what is happening here, actually, it's a great photo. If you look to the left, it's great for 2 reasons. Number one, was actually 3. Look at the color of the capping. Look at the wax color on that green cell. You see how white that is? Now I want you to look down and look at aren't they cute? Look how cute those bees are. they're when you don't see bees up close, you just really can't see how cute and fuzzy they are. But I think they're kind of adorable, to be honest. But look how dark these bees are. We run a lot of Caucasian and Carniolan stock. Caucasian specifically are known as some of the best comb honey strains of bees because for whatever reason they tend to make the whitest wax. And so every year, as I'm going through my self starters and I'm, how much Caucasian is in this colony, how much is in that one, I know right away during queen season because the colonies that are producing that white cappings on all of those queen cells, 9 times out of 10 are the darkest of all of the bees. Their behavior is more in line with the Caucasians. So that's one cool thing. The second cool little learning opportunity here is I just mentioned my preference on how full that JZBZ cup is with royal jelly. And as you can see, that thing is completely full. So if I were to actually pull that cell apart and look, there something happened in that development, and that is not going, in my opinion, that is not going to be a viable queen. Had I called that, or if I would have seen it, I would have called that out, and that would have never made it to a mating nuke or a split. I wouldn't have wasted it. I wouldn't have chanced it. The third thing to look at that's pretty neat is you can kind of see, you see where my fingers are kind of holding the nipple of that JZBZ cup. You can kind of see when you look down, there's those little quadrants just below that nipple, right? Now that is a great opportunity. If you were to look down into that cell from above, you want to see royal jelly there, but you don't want to see that the entire base of that cup is full. So a great quick way to call and look is, do I have royal jelly in the top? Yes. Look at it from the side. Is it all the way full? Or can you tell that she was actually mowing down and actually eating something? For me, those are the ones that go to the next step. So just little tiny nuances. I think we all probably do that a little bit different, but that's been my experience. Those are some things that I look for ahead of time. And then you can see here, this is a beautiful way to raise queens. I learned this from Chris Werner and his crew down in Florida with some of my time spent with them. But this is a very classic way to raise queens. It's a 10 frame box with pull out dividers. That is some heavy duty window screening on top as the inner cover, and then just a flat migratory lid goes on top. But we can raise 3 colonies in that same 10 frame box. And what I love about it is the size frames that we can raise the queens and the colony on. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what's beautiful about this is we can just keep running cycles of queens in this setup. And then when we get to the end of the year, as we pull 2 of those queens out, we leave 1 queen behind and we pull both dividers and let them build up for winter and they're done. So we can use the same piece of equipment to raise queens, but also pull the dividers and use it as a single going into wintertime. I love that. Absolutely love that. So on day 12 to 14, this is going to depend on temperature, a little bit of humidity. At the end of day 12 through the beginning of day 14, is when these queens are going to start to emerge. And so I like to get out there 1 to 2 days before that and set all of my queen cells, right? The day before is perfect, right? So you've made your split. They're now queenless. You've knocked all the queen cells down. They've got no queen, okay? Then I come back the next day and then drop these queen cells in there, okay? What I do, that's, I think, how a lot of beekeepers could be successful doing that. What I do is a little bit different, but I will go through and harvest. Like if I was in this 3-way box here, if I was harvesting the queens out of each compartment, I would make sure that I've got cat brood, that she's laying beautifully, and if she was, I would grab the queen, I would mark her, I would put her into a queen cage with attendants. All of those get bundled together, and those get shipped across the country. Now, in that same, I'm all about efficiency. When I am pulling the queen out of each one of those compartments, the moment I pull the queen out and cage her with me, I already have all my cap cells ready to go. So in that moment where I pull the queen, and cage her, I give those bees a capped queen cell that's going to hatch tomorrow. Tomorrow, within, in my opinion, within minutes of me pulling that queen, they know they are queenless. Now, tomorrow, before they have time to do anything, that cell, that capped cell that I just introduced to them is now hatching. And that keeps this cycle going and going and going. And when you don't rush it and you give them enough time, you always have emerging brood coming off of those frames to replenish those nurse bees and to keep each one of those compartments stocked with bees as you're pulling queens.
Greg, quick question there. Are you using a cell protector as you're dropping that cell in? Your picture doesn't show one.
It depends. If I am sometimes I do. If I am dropping a queen cell the day that I'm pulling a queen, I sometimes will put a cell protector on so they have no chance on chewing that out. In times where they are completely queenless, they've got no chance of making a queen. I don't fool with the cell protectors. I just drop the queen cell right in because there's not going to be any kind of issues there at all. So great question.
Thank you.
Next in the kind of the important timeline on the beekeeper calendar is 21 days later. Okay, you may have heard about a 21-day queen. This is not that moment yet. This is 21 days from our grafting process. Typically, is going to be about the earliest we're going to see a queen get mated and come back and start to see the first eggs. And that's usually a beautiful sign, right? Sometimes it can take a way longer than that. We've actually, believe it or not, I'll ask you guys a question. How long, what is the mating window for a queen? I think a lot of folks will say, oh, 7 to 10 days, but within, 14 days, right? We actually ran an interesting trial in the learning yard, and we had a queen who she just would not get mated. And this little bitty thing was running around the colony. The colony was kind of on edge, but she never would get mated. 4 weeks into this, she still wasn't mated. So I took the queen, I caged her, I moved her over to a new colony, and then we came back the next learning yard. So now we're 5 weeks into this, and she had just started laying eggs. So whether she decided to then go on a mating flight, whether there was something different between that colony, like isn't that beautiful though? The communication and it's not just as though the queen is ruling the roost and she decides, okay, I'm gonna go do this and I'm gonna do that. There is so much nuance and communication and direction within a colony, in my opinion, to help make decisions and when to do this and when to do that, that the other colony, they may have had some kind of hitch in the giddy up. Maybe they had some kind of virus that they knew. Maybe they just didn't have the nutrition to take care of any. So they kept holding her back, holding her back, holding her back. That colony started to collapse because after that many weeks, they were losing bees and they had no young bees in there. You move her out of that scenario into another colony, and like right away, green light, go get mates, comes back, and it was 5 weeks. 5 weeks later, she's now laying eggs and was a beautiful colony. So that is kind of outside of the realm of things that you typically hear, but they're bugs in a box. They're not reading the same books that we are. But 21 days on the beekeeper's grafting calendar is typically when I'm going to see the earliest eggs. And then the one of my most important dates, if you are selling queens, day 33. You're thinking, day 33, what in the world? It's that long of a process? Yes. Because it's at day 33. Now we get into the opportunity where we're having queens that are mature and old enough to be beautiful, productive, mature enough queens. And so what that means is we've got capped brood, we've got eggs, all stages of larvae. I can now actually start to judge the quality of this queen before she goes down the road. A lot of times you'll see folks, if they see an egg at all, okay, we're going to grab the queen and ship her. I'm not here to say that is poor quality. But what I can say is queens don't have it figured out yet. Things can still happen with the quality of the queen where they may lay for a couple days and then something happens. She has an injury or just the physical nature of herself. That's all that she could do, and she peters out. I want to make sure that when a queen goes down the road, that she is a beautiful, mature queen that is starting to come into herself. These queens, even at 21 days, they still don't have their full swagger yet. When she gets into 35 and 45 days, that is when you start to see big, way bigger, more voluptuous queens start to take shape when they're a couple months old. And then over that first winter and that next spring, that's when you start to see those big mamas with the hips and the alligator tails that are just dragging across the comb. That doesn't happen in this first 45-day time frame. So a lot of times you'll hear people say, "Oh, just a mated queen, she's so small." Well, yes, she won't be that massive abdomen, gator tail dragging across the comb until next spring, but it's really fun to actually watch the queen slowly start to develop and get the hips and get that bigger size, get that bigger shape. And then with that size and shape also comes maybe some different personalities and attitudes, dare I even say. But it's so incredibly fascinating how much changes and how the bees change and what that means for the colony on the inside. So if you're thinking, okay, Greg, all that sounds like way too complicated. Like I don't know that I can see the larvae, let alone graft it. And even if I could see it, how am I supposed to know if it's the right age? And how do I not flip it over? And how do I not smash it? And how do I get a self starter that's actually healthy enough to put that in? And how do I get them out at the right time? And what happens if I pull them out at the wrong time and I don't have an incubator and I can't let them just sit in the cell starter because they'll knock them all down? How in the world am I ever going to make any of those queens? And so I want to encourage you to start with the easiest way first. Grafting is cool. Grafting is awesome. When you need 20 queens every single week on a certain day, then grafting is for you. But if you need less than that, I want to encourage you to let the bees do all the work. And you might be thinking, what in the world are you talking about? I don't have time to get into some of these stories, but I can tell you that for many, many years we raised. I'm gonna conservatively. I don't even know how many several thousand queens that we have raised as we were building our business and we're building our yards up without grafting at all. You're thinking, what are you talking about? No, I wasn't buying queens. I was letting the bees do all the work, and I want to share with you probably my one of my this dirty little secret of spring queening. Not spring cleaning, spring queening. You're thinking, what are you talking about? So, one of the things that I absolutely love to do is once the maple starts to bloom here and it's creating pollen, and the bees are starting to they're really starting to, you can see we're heading into that spring direction. I've already had colonies that I've kind of favored last year, and ones that I earmarked, like that big monster hive, or the one that was in triple deeps that no matter what I did, they didn't want to swarm and produce a beautiful honey crop. The ones that are extremely calm and gentle, the ones that have the low mite counts all year, right? These are all the colonies that I'm looking at all year long, and then give them the great metric, the great test, and that's winter. I don't even want to talk about this winter for everybody, but anything that gets through winter and is now coming into the spring that has already met my criteria, those are ones that I am really, really excited about. Those are going to be ones that I'm going to breed from in that next year. So here's my dirty little secret, and I would encourage you all to try this. What I do is on my most favorite colonies, pick two. I don't give them any room and I crowd them out. And I intentionally push them towards swarming. And I get them all the way to that point where they have now decided they're going to swarm. and they start making swarm cells inside of that colony. Once they do that and they have capped swarm cells inside of these colonies, you have just hit the mother load. You have already selected and said, I want more of this in my genetic makeup with my bees. And you said, I want this colony and that colony to be a part of the future. And now you're telling the bees, go ahead and swarm, put on those, go ahead and make queen cells. They are the ones picking the perfect size larvae. They're the ones that are feeding them with complete and perfect nutrition to nurture it from the very beginning, every single future queen, keeping it warm, nurturing it. They know which are the extreme winners out of all those possibilities. And right as those cells are being capped, now I come in. What I love to do is if I can find mama, I'll pull her out in a couple frames, supporting frames. I'll just take her, I'll make a nice little 5-frame nuke, and I'll just move them somewhere else in the yard. I'll leave 1 or 2 of the cells that that colony just made inside of one of those boxes, but then I'll go ahead and make 3 or 4 more splits. To do this, I'm either A, moving a frame that has 1 or 2 cap cells on it, or I'm using a little paring knife and I'm cutting queen cells off the foundation. And yes, you can 100% cut queen cells off of plastic foundation without cutting the plastic foundation. I've done it for years. Matter of fact, one afternoon I was out with Bob Benny and we were working one of his yards, and we're working a 4-way pallet. And in my box, I say, Bob, looks like we need a queen here. There's no queen. And as it were to be, the colony he's working in had just put on cells, including a cap cell. So what does Bob do? Reaches in his pocket, pulls out his cased pocket knife, cuts a queen cell right off of his frame, and literally grafts it, just pokes it right into the wax on one of mine. And he says, okay, they're good to go. Put that thing in there. Cutting cells is one of the greatest tools and tricks that you could ever do. And so we did that for so many years, cut queen cells out and make splits. It's a beautiful opportunity to let the bees do all of the work, and all you do is harvest the cell. Now all you have to do is make up a split or put that into a queenless colony and let nature run its course from there. That is a huge, huge shortcut into having mated queens that you had a hand in without having all the potential fail points of the grafting and the incubating and all the timing. So if you start with the easiest thing first, which is letting the bees do the work, now all you have to do is focus on the timeline and time frames of those virgins emerging and how long it takes to go on a mating flight and whether or not she's mated successfully. That is all you're focusing on. And once you build repetition and know and can look at a queen cell and say, okay, that in 2 days that'll hatch, or that was just capped, I'm going to give that a little bit longer. You'll start to learn the nuance and develop a sense for the age of the cell to know when you actually want to move it. That is a huge advantage over trying to learn every aspect of grafting, get that all performed correctly just to get to the point where you have a cap cell that you can do something with. It's heartbreaking because so many folks want to raise queen, and it is the most rewarding aspect of it. But all of the first few steps that leads to a capped queen cell there are so many potentials for failure, and so many folks will experience that and they will give up and they will never make their first queen. I want folks to be excited about making queens. Take a hand in this. Let the bees do the hard, heavy lifting, and then let's just take advantage of that timeline and put those queen cells in. So that's my dirty little spring queening secret is I will use my favorite breeder queens. I will push them towards swarming so they make the queen cells for me. And now, off my most favorite mother queens, they are making beautiful, beautiful daughters from those genetic lines. And I will use those out to seed my yards, especially ones that I want to build up to be drone yards for mating. So that's a beautiful way to do that. It's really easy to cut queen cells. On the left here, this is one that's being cut on, that was actually foundation list, was a starter strip at the top. Back in the day when we first were getting going, we did a lot of small cell beekeeping and starter strip beekeeping. We don't do things like that anymore. That's a story for a different day. But just in my hand, I mean, what is that? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. There's 7 cells there. One is actually hatching out in my hand. 7 capped queen cells. If those go to maturity at the price of queens, at $40 a queen or whatever it is in your neck of the woods, you do the math. But there is $200 to $300 and potential queens in my hand, and all I did is let the bees do the work and then cut it out. I absolutely love that. From there, you're cutting the queen cell out and just dropping it right in between. When I say drop, I don't mean literally drop it. Maybe I should. That's kind of, I guess, beekeeper slang, but we are setting those cap cells in between 2 frames. We're gently pushing that into the wax of a frame, but we are placing those cap cells here. That particular box, that was an 8 frame medium that was split into 3, and that worked great too. You might know that as called a queen castle, maybe, or a 3-way box. We did an awful lot of that, and it just worked beautifully. But you can take those same cut cells or those frames and just go make a bunch of splits. What's beautiful about this picture, um, some you may have seen this yard, or there are videos from this farm. We still have this farm. For us, this is the old farm yard. And you any videos that you saw where we were milking the cows or making splits or doing, that's all from this farm here. It's beautiful because you can see the apples are in bloom. Red bud off to the right, you probably can't see that. It's behind the apples there. But when the wild crab apples bloom, boy, that is prime time. That is, you can do no wrong in the bee yard time. And I love this picture because it goes back, boy, that's probably maybe 6, 7 years ago. But while some of the things, the more things change, the more they stay the same. That is just was a beautiful way to make a lot of queens. This particular yard was one that grew out to, I think we had going into one of the winners, this particular queen yard ended up being a nuke yard because after we pulled the queens for queen orders, we set one more queen cell, let it mature, let it build up, and then we had all these 5 frame deep singles or 5/5s going into the wintertime. If you've heard us talk about the debacle with Apogard and me killing over 100 and some nukes with Apogard, this is that exact place where that happened. So, as beautiful as something can be with beekeeping, it can also be a little painful, but that's beekeeping, the ups and downs and the cycle of all that. But I like being able to share some of my happy little places with you guys so you can see, where it is that I'm blessed to keep bees. Just a beautiful, beautiful place there. The one thing I'll say, you can see there's a nuke box into one of the trees there, just as a backup swarm thing. I've never caught a swarm there. I've never taken the box out. It's just one of those things. But what's cool about that tree, you can kind of see some pink coloration on the trunk. That is the Frankenapple tree. And that is a story for a different day. But kind of if you go back to the beginning of the talk, talking about Proverbs, pride goes before a fall. We spent probably 10 years trying to grow apple trees in this very heavy clay soil. And after 10 years, the trees were about maybe 20 inches tall. They couldn't get with the program. And one year I'm sitting there, I'm looking around and I'm thinking, what am I doing? Why am I forcing these very specific root stocks of apples to grow on this soil? that they don't want to grow on, but I look around and nature's the best teacher. And here's all these native wild crab apples growing everywhere. Well, why don't I just graft the cultivar of apples that I want onto the wild rootstock? That's what we did. So that particular tree there with the nuke box in it, that's the Franken apple tree. And in that season, I think I had grafted, I think 18 different varieties of apples onto the same wild crab apple tree. I got to go back. I didn't even check on it last year, but I need to go back this spring because that thing should now be pretty abundant and be in fruit. So, anyways, I'm gonna stay on track here, Brian. I promise.
Doing great.
Let queens mature. Do you think age matters? I'm sure you've heard about that a little bit. Does age matter on queens? Um, I just I'm a goober. I think they're adorable. I mean, have you ever seen a queen up close, really, where you can see how fuzzy they are and how much hair that they are, let alone, I mean, look at her toenails. I mean, have you ever seen like that is really cool to be able to see some of those things. Another thing that's maybe not beautiful, but you always know a guy who raises queens. Look at my finger and my thumb. You see all those little freckles, those little dark spots? Every single little dark spot that you see in any videos on my fingers or all over my hands, those are those are sting scars. And so that's just what my body does. And most beekeepers, it creates this little kind of a blood blister thing as it heals. And it creates, and on my hands at least, these permanent little bee sting freckles all over the place. But it sort of looks kind of nasty, actually, when I'm looking at my fingerprints and skin cells there. But I guess the beauty and the beast, I guess, is that photo there. But this is a great way. That's my son Jake, in the one corner, and then me in the other. If you look, uh, now, yes, you might have just seen a ghost. Pay no attention to the white pasty legs, but yes, I'm catching queens in short pants. We raise bees that are calm intentionally, and if they don't get with that program, they don't have a place in our genetic yard. But one of my most favorite ways to raise queens, we started building these six-way pallets where there are six five-frame deep boxes per skid, and we'll go through and just pick. And I like that because we can have larger format frames in each box, and it lets us give these queens nearly as literally as much time as I think they need or I think that I want. If I don't get around to pulling queens out of that yard that week, it's no big deal. They've got room to grow. And if I don't get around for another week or two, it's still no big deal because if I want to sell it as a nuke, it's ready to go. If I want to pull the queen out of it, then they're really juiced up and ready for another queen cell, and they'll still produce. I can also now take that five frame nuke and go plug that in somewhere. I could take that to a different yard and set up, plug in some four-way 10 frame boxes that maybe had a dead out or something happened. So I love making queens and having these little nuke setups because we always have a backup plan. We always have extra queens. We always have nukes in the making. But I kind of like the fact that got short pants on because it's a good reminder of one of our main really big goals is raising bees that are joy to work with. Joyful, calm, gentle bees should not be a luxury. I want to see a lot more folks have bees that they enjoy working because they're not out for blood. That just has no place for us. But does age matter? I think so. In my own experience, I have seen how young queens perform and how more mature queens perform. Unfortunately, a lot of queens that are available and for sale, a lot of these queens are literally they maybe laid an egg and sometimes not. You don't know. I'm not judging, and I'm not saying that if folks don't do it the way that we do it, that they do a poor job. I'm just simply stating that it is unfortunately common for queens to be pulled when they're a little young, before they've had time to kind of prove themselves, and you know right away. Like this queen here, for instance, that you're seeing, that queen, that is not even a 21-day queen. She's getting in more of that 45-day. Look how big and voluptuous she is. You can start to see the hair is starting to come off that thorax. They actually get a little balder on that thorax the older that they get, but they have a certain swagger as they are interacting with the colony and on the frame. Those young queens, boy, they are just skittery. I'm not even sure if that's a word, but they're quick. They're moving around. They're a little bit high strung, right? They're almost jumpy a little bit. But the queens that have just they have developed and matured into that fullness, that essence of who they are. They just they're calm, cool, collected. They just do their thing. They're dedicated. They know the drill. They have that retinue around them. Everyone's kind of following them around and doing that thing. That takes a little bit of time. You know, we have 7 kids, right? They all act the young ones act different than as they mature. With age comes wisdom and grace, and a certain way of carrying yourself. That these older queens, they just do the same thing. So in older, I mean in that 45-day time frame. So I love to see older queens like this be the ones that we're sending to customers. And again, when I say older queens, I don't mean last year's queens. I mean older in this early queen cycle. I don't want to see queens that are 14 days old going down the road. I want to make sure that they have as much time as possible. When I pull a queen out of a box, I want to almost have a knee-jerk reaction where I say, "Oh, this queen is too good to go down the road. I want to keep her for myself." Those are the queens that get caged and get shipped. They've got to be that good. Same thing with nukes. It has to be something that I would be honored and proud to buy. Those are the ones that I think that are important to ship to send to folks across the country.
Can I add something here?
Yeah,
You're talking about that readiness of a queen from a seller's perspective, making sure she looks good, she's been
yeah,
laying enough, she's gonna make sure that customer gets that queen that they ordered. I have seen, no matter how people raise queens, that excited queen rearer go into their colony during that really sensitive time when that new queen is just laying eggs. Can you talk about that sensitive time and why it's important, whether you're selling queens or not, to just let that new queen be for a little bit?
yeah. I don't know. There's probably some more exact science to it. But if I could put it in layman's terms, what I have seen thousands and thousands of times is that those queens that are fresh. It's almost as though imagine. And I got to be careful because I don't want to anthropomorphize. It makes it maybe a little bit easier to understand. But as we get a little bit older and we start to learn who we are and why we are, we almost develop it, a humble confidence that we have purpose. We know what the work is out in front of us. We have that purpose assigned, and now we're going to dig in and do the work. As especially me, as I was younger, I mean, it's just constantly scroll dogging. What do I do? How do I do it? Which is the opportunity? Blah blah blah. Right. And then I think there's a certain vulnerability in that growth aspect of our life. But with the queens, they I don't know that they have had time for the pheromones and everything to fully mature and develop. And here's what's most important outside of my observations or what I think. When you just look at the queen and the bees that are in the colony, when you start to see them really paying attention to her and you see them moving on the frames like a cohesive unit with purpose, with design, that's the right queen. But the queen that's running around by herself, right? And she just doesn't have it quite figured out yet. And yeah, she's laying here and she's laying there and going around, and a couple bees come and see her, right? But like she needs more time. She has not fully came into her full essence yet. She's not respected enough, in my opinion, by the colony, and she hasn't proven herself yet enough to that colony for them to take notice. So if the bees in the colony aren't taking notice of the queen, that is not a queen that I want to go down the road. I want the queen that has had time to kind of sit in, develop as much as she can. When the bees are paying attention to her, and you will know it when you start raising queens, you will just absolutely know it because when you pull a frame out, right, and it's that right aged queen, she's doing her thing, right. It's so easy to pick her up, grab her, mark her, everything is chilled and relaxed. The ones that are like, Speedy Gonzalez, right, and they're just going all like, though they need more time. What I've seen, it's been my experience when those less mature queens go down the road, those can be the ones that could likely have a callback on. The ones that maybe there's an introduction problem because maybe she just doesn't quite have enough of that pheromone developed. If she's not recognized as being royalty in your mating nuke, she's not going to be recognized as royalty in your customer's hive. So make sure that she is royalty when she leaves your place, and you won't have any problems when she gets to her next home.
Thank you.
The size matter. We've already touched on that. Absolutely, hands down, in my opinion, it does. And what I mean by that, and again, like I said, this is no slight or dig at anyone who raises queens and styrofoam minis. But one of the massive problems with that is just not having enough coverage to do anything, right? In this case, this photo actually goes both ways, where we have some larvae that got too cold and got chilled and looks nasty in the bottom. There wasn't enough bees in there to keep that warm. That's one aspect of the picture on the right. What also happens is that they grow so fast inside of those boxes that you don't get a good snapshot of the brood. When you're talking about three little tiny mini frames like that, where you've got brood that's, maybe the size of a half of a dollar bill in there. In my opinion, that is not enough brood to be able to judge the quality of a queen. Um, if you are doing this for yourself to make a bunch of quick queens, and then you're going to put these into your colonies, no problem. Like do that, right? And if there's failures, then it stays in your yard. But I'm not a big fan of commercially raising queens on these because I don't feel as though they are mature enough. Now, I am not casting shade on those that do this, but it is a known fact that it is nearly impossible to raise queens past day 14 or 17 in this configuration. And you might say, well, 17 days and 21 days, I mean, that's only, what is that, 3, 4, 5? It's only 5 days. That's not that big a deal. We have to understand exponentially, that is massive. 5 more days of maturity on a queen literally is make or break. Queens, in my opinion, from a lot of the feedback that I've heard from so many folks, a lot of the queen failure and supersedure queens often are because they're just not royalty when they get there. They are not old enough. They're not mature enough. They're not doing that job as that queen mother who has it together. Those are the ones that are very often superseded or eliminated by the colony right away. So you can very greatly increase your take rates on those queens that have had more time to develop. And do drones matter? I think it's very clear. I think we all understand that drones do matter. But I do just want to plant this little seed. You know, we a lot of folks will they'll use these green drone frames um, because it'll be a part of their integrated pest management. They are raising drones on green frames to remove from the colony. And if you're not raising queens, that's probably not a bad idea. However, I want to throw this out at you. These drones are the longest maturing bee in the colony. 24 days is their cycle. And if you look at them, they are just developed and built completely different. And it is not uncommon for drones to visit all the neighboring colonies. I don't believe it's because they're free lunchers and they're just looking for a little different smorgasbord or a little different variety of food. Or it's my opinion that I think there's a lot more going on with drones. And this is, if you can find where this is supported somewhere, then please go to our website at naturesimagefarm.com, go to the contact us and shoot me a message. If you can find a link or you can find a study or anything to support this, I would love to see it. Right now, I'm talking to you about a gut feeling and a sense that I have for these bees. So take that with a grain of salt. But when you powder sugar a colony, including the drones, and you watch that colony of white powdery drones end up in 20 or 30 colonies that afternoon, like what are they doing? Is it just food that they're after? I almost tend to believe the more I just sit and watch the bees, I almost want to believe that there is some kind of shared intel with drones that they somehow are getting a lay of the land or a feel for what's going on, almost as though they're checking in with other colonies. Is that scientifically proven? I have no idea. But my gut feeling says that there is something way more valuable and important to these drones than to just be there for the one uh, procreative, productive mechanism that is very important that they do. I think there's maybe more to their story than just saying, drones are good for one thing. I don't believe that. I think there's something else going on there. But aren't they beautiful? They're absolutely gorgeous. I love working with them. They're just there's something very very special about drones. And so for us, we make sure that we've got a lot of drones going on. You got to be careful. You have to make sure that you're on top of your IPMs and you're monitoring for mites because this is where things are going to go south in a hurry. So you got to make sure that you are paying attention. I wish I'm going to find the picture and hopefully get it into the next presentation that I do this. But one of the really really cool things that we see with drones is I just call them blackout drones. You guys have seen like the blackout military trucks where the headlight everything is just black, right? Even with the lights on, it's all black. Well, I don't know how it happens. If it's um, a recessive trait within Caucasian, but what I will see is literally all black, other than their wings, jet black. Their hair, their abdomen, their thorax, the rings, their eyes, everything, just jet black, blackout black. Like it, when you see it, you're thinking, what in the world is going on here? Um, Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful little critters. Um, just another little sense of what I am blessed to be a part of and see. This is kind of what a standard drone yard looks like for us. They can be in singles sometimes, but a lot of times drone yards are kind of multi-purpose yards where if they want to squeeze out a super of honey, then great. But we're usually trying to get these colonies built up to where we have thousands and thousands and thousands of drones lifting off in all areas. We're blessed where we are raising queens is that we've got the queen mating yard is kind of centrally located, and we have little drone hubs spread out around in about a half to 3/4 mile radius all the way around. So no matter which way the queen goes, we just have an enormous drone saturation all the way around it, and so that's just a beautiful shot. One of my favorite things is when you look into the sun and you see these beautiful, just little beams of sunshine with wings just in that sun. I love seeing that. So there's one little shot of that. And then here's another yard. This is a yard for drones of mostly singles. But this is kind of this is the landscape that we work in, and just a beautiful bed of white clover and a lot of hardwoods, a lot of black locust, a lot of blackberry, a lot of white clover, yellow clover, just beautiful, beautiful country. Um, I could go on and on and on and on and on, and I love Queens and I love all those things. But if you've heard our podcast or you've seen any of our videos, you kind of know what we stand for. But if there is one thing that you guys remember out of all of this talk, it would be this. Matthew 5:14 through 16, that you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven. When we say be the lighthouse, that's what we mean. Be a lighthouse to somebody else. Share God's love. Be there for somebody else. We've all been that ship out on stormy seas, taken on water, don't know which way to turn, and there has been somebody who has been a lighthouse, has been that helping hand that helped us get through that storm. That's what we mean by Be the Lighthouse. If you want to learn more about all the stuff that we get into, the wax, the EnduraHive waxed equipment, the Propola boxes, Queen Right dial, Premier frames, there's a QR code there. You can check us out on our website at nature'simagefarm.com. We ship this stuff out all the time. We've got lots of videos on this too. If you have any questions, you can find us at nature'simagefarm.com. You can click the About Us and shoot us a message. Would love to talk to you more about bees. There's my beautiful wife, Susie, and I. We do this whole thing together. So if you want to find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, I don't know if we're on TikTok or not anymore. I'm not sure where that's at, but we're everywhere else. Just you can Google us, find us. Love talking about bees, and I think that is it. Brian, thanks a lot for you and your club for having us in here to talk about bees. I love doing it and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Greg. Great job. Do you have a couple of minutes for questions?
Absolutely.
All right, we've got a couple in the chat already. Doug wants to know if you have the bees polish your cups before grafting.
I don't. Great question. We subscribe to the dry grafting method. So we don't prime cups ahead of time. We don't have the bees polish them ahead of time. I literally pull them right out of the JZBZ bag, um, like this. Literally, I pull them right out of the bag and set them into my cell bar and graft. I don't do anything special with that. On average, we're probably somewhere in the, I don't know, 85 to 95% take rate. Maybe if we were to put them in and have them polish it, or maybe we get like a couple extra percent. But for the success rate that we've seen, for the effort put into it, that's not something that we do. We do what I call a dry graft. So we've done it all. We've used every type of grafting tool. We tried to do wet grafting at first, which was taking royal jelly and then priming the cells and then graft into it, because somewhere I heard that was the best. What I found, that didn't work. And so what we do is we actually, when it is the correct grafting material, there is the correct amount of royal jelly in those cells. And when you dip in with your grafting tool, they go right underneath the larvae. It catches all the royal jelly that comes out, and that's placed into the cell, and that's it. And if you've seen any of our videos, when we're actually grafting, everything's over here, so I really can't show you that well. But it's this fast. It's almost like a sewing needle. It's just quick, quick, quick. Because eventually you learn to stop looking. Your hand knows the way and the touch, and it's you just uh, you know the area of that comb where it's the right side, and you just go to town. So that's a great question. That's not something that we do though.
Thank you. It's that muscle memory that you build over time,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
If you're grafting just one bar, where is the best placement of that bar on your grafting frame? Top, middle, bottom?
Great question. We didn't have we didn't go into detail on that, but what the cell starter looks like for me in a 10 frame box is I will have a frame feeder against the outside wall. I'll then put if I have it, a frame of fresh foundation for them to draw on. I'll then have a frame that's got loaded full of pollen, um, and potentially capped honey and pollen. Then I'll put my grafts right next to that. On the other side of my grafts is another frame that has pollen and or bee bread. On the other side of that, a frame that's got a little bit of honey. and then we just start filling out brood frames from there on out. So I surround my grafts with food. And then I've got a frame feeder in my cell starter because, a week prior to that starter being a candidate, it is getting juiced up with syrup and pollen patties to make sure they are nutritionally squared away. If you're going into, let's say, doubles, for instance, in this situation, I'm always thinking of my cell starter as a single because as it starts, it's typically always a single. Even with a queen list starter, queen right finisher, those graphs are going in underneath of a double screen board. And so that bottom box is queenless. There's a double screen board on top and the queen's on the very, very top. So as I split that and put my graphs in that bottom box, it's that same orientation, no matter where you put it. But I would put those graphs where you've got the bees that are going to do the work. So right in where you've got brood and those young nurse bees and all of that food, you're going to find all the correct food for the grafts are going to be where the bees had assigned that to be for the nurse bees. So it's not going to be on top in a super. It's not going to, and I mean, the bees could be brooding in the top box for all you know, right? So wherever they are in the configuration, I always put the graphs where I've got the young nurse bees because where the young nurse bees are is where the pollen is. The number one thing is I like to have those graphs in that place where I've got the bee bread and the pollen.
Thank you. What about favorite, least favorite colors for grafting cups?
Um, I have not seen a take rate difference between any of them. We
What about
use
for
the
candling purposes? Are either easier or harder to candle?
they all of them are easily candled with a light on the back. Um, I actually I didn't take the video last year, but I took photos to see. And what I would do is like on a frame of 45, I would do one red, one charcoal, one green, and then on the next one I would switch it up, yellow, charcoal, blue, to see this color matter, and it never did. I never saw them reject a certain color or prefer a certain color. Um, they just prefer me to put the right size in there was the main thing.
Thank you. Carl asks, I'm not sure when in your description he asked this, but he asked, does Greg come back and check for queen cells? Again, I'm not sure when in your
Okay, so
process.
yeah, so during the self-starting period, so we talked about day one is grafting for the beekeeper. What day zero would be or day -1 would be is self-starter prep. Okay, so that's a couple days before actual grafting that we're going through and making sure that that scenario is correct. So uh, if let's do the easiest way to do that would be today we're going into a colony and we're going to prep it to be a cell starter. So what I would do is either a bucket feeder on top or a frame feeder in there and make sure they've got thin syrup, and then I would put a pollen patty on. And that same motion, I would also, if I can, find the queen, the frame that she's on, and just a couple of support frames, and then move her out of that colony into a nuke box somewhere else. Doesn't even matter where, just away from there. And then I'm going to come back 3 to 5 days. 3 days is fine. But I'm going to come back and go through every single frame, shake the bees off the frame, and look for all of those queen cells. I'm going to go through and eliminate every single queen cell that they've made. Okay. Everything goes back in the box. I'm going to touch up their feed. And then the next day starts day one for grafting. So there is some self starter prep that you have to get right, but you're absolutely right. You've got to go in there and make sure you knock down those queen cells. There is nothing worse than see them start the queen cells that you gave them and then reject and take them all down because some knucklehead started one or two queen cells one day before that. So you definitely got to be facetious with that. And I would highly encourage you to pull, when you pull that frame out, shake the bees off just gently. So that way you can look everywhere, every nook and cranny, and even the places where you think there is no way they can make a queen cell there, they will. anywhere they can. So um, definitely check for queen cells, knock those down, and that'll be the biggest success rates. And let me just say this: you can do everything right, but when you are working with making queens, what happens when those queens hatch? Right? They as soon as they hatch, they turn around and they go head back up into the cell and they'll clean up as much royal jelly is still there. Then they'll come out, they'll be greeted by the colony, they'll be cleaned, they'll be fed, they'll be nurtured, right? And then on average, 4 to 10 days from that point, she may go on a mating flight, right? Maybe more six to 10 days. When she leaves, sometimes she goes to the wrong door when she comes home. And she goes into another colony that may be a cell starter, right? You have no idea. It happens more than you think. I've done everything right, and I've gone through, and they've knocked. There's 45 cells all torn down. Everything is chewed up, but the colony is beautifully calm, and they have that certain productive hum. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? They act like they have a queen, and then you cruise through the frames, and there it is. There's a brand new there's a virgin queen running around there. Well, she's not really a virgin now. She had just got mated and came back, and they've accepted her, and they've torn everything down. So you can have virgins. I say a virgin, and until I confirm her mating, her pattern, her laying pattern, you have a freshly mated queen that comes back from a mating flight into a cell starter, and it ruins the whole entire thing. So that's a story for another day. Good question.
All right. So yeah, so let's kind of transfer that to a different situation a little bit. You've got a three-way mating nuke. You pull out those queens, you drop a queen cell in, you don't bother checking for queen cells. What if it's the next day? I didn't get to bring my queen cells out. I drop those queen cells in tomorrow. Do you bother looking for cells started? And if
No,
not, when down the road do you bother? If it's gotten like if when is that gap between pulling that queen and dropping that queen cell long enough that it's important to do so, knowing
great
that's
question.
probably not an ideal time frame to start
Yeah.
off with.
Yeah. So the reason, let me back up just a sec. The reason that I drop the queens, or I drop is we set or place the queen cell
Okay.
in that time frame where we're caging the queen. When I say drop, people say, "Well, doesn't that squash the queen cell? Why would you drop it?" And that, like, no, it's just when we set or place the queen cell, we're doing it for efficiency. I've already have the lid open, the colony is exposed. I'm pulling the queens, and that same motion of time, I'm placing the queen cell as a matter of efficiency. Now I've known I've gone through this entire yard. I've gone through these. They don't need me for a while. Rather than re-tripping and coming back to that same set of colonies to open up a lid again to get inside of there, that's one more point of disturbance and on. So, but to your question, Brian, if you were to come back in 3 days to set a ripe queen cell, and a ripe queen cell is a queen cell that's going to be hatching within 24 to 48 hours. Target is 24 hours. So if you think about how long it takes them to do anything, from the moment that I would pull that queen out of there, if I don't come back and put a queen in there, if they decide in that first hour to go ahead and start working on a new queen, they're going to be somewhere around 14 days ish or so, 14 to 16 if they went all the way back from and waited on egg to maturity. We've got a 2 week time frame before anything is going to emerge. So sometimes if I go in at day 10 or 11 or 12 from after all of that and give them a queen cell that's going to hatch tomorrow, even if they did already had a hidden queen cell, mine's going to hatch first. So if that happens, a lot of times they'll take what hatches first. Now, sometimes bees have a mind of their own and they will only take and accept the queen cell that they make. So it has happened and it can happen where if you wait too long and then put the queen cell in, although yours is going to hatch a day before the one that they made, they will kill the one that you give them because they already say, we are squared away. We already have a plan. I don't know what that is, but we didn't do it. We don't want it. If you go in the day that they're queenless or 2 days or 3 days, I think you're totally fine. But if you go 3 to 5 days later, they're already very well committed down the road of making a queen cell. You may want to use a cell protector at that point in time, which is one of these. If you've not seen that, the actual queen cell slips into here. Imagine there's actually a queen capped queen cell on this. This slips right into here. And what that does is that queen cell is now hidden in here, and the bees can't tear it or chew it down or come through here and chew the thing down. She actually can hatch and come into that colony without being killed first. So cell protectors are your friends in those iffy timelines. But you know, when in doubt, just literally shake the bees out, shake the bees off the frames, look for the queen cells, search and destroy. I think it's
Mm.
an, is that, what is that? Is that Metallica? I'm not sure what, seek and destroy.
Seek and destroy. That's
That's
right.
it. Seek and destroy. Find them, knock them down, and then give them the cell you want.
All right. Zuria wants to know, what incubator do you feel actually works well?
Let's see. I'll show you. Let me get to my, okay. Okay.
You
Bear with
talked
me
about
here.
you talked about inconsistent temperatures in the one you had in the picture. Is there a fan in your preferred one to keep that temperature even throughout?
Yeah. So this one here is a GQF. It's a 1500 model professional. Let's see. There's some, look at that. Look at those stickers up there, Brian. You ever seen those before?
Nice.
That's a GQ. It's
Look
a
like
cabinet egg. It's an egg incubator with the turner. I took the turners out and then fixed the shelves in place. That's what I use. I think I can get. I've never even come close to maxing that out, but it stays very consistent. That top box. Let's see. I don't. Yeah, this. Oh, I can't point here. Yeah, this top box here holds. I think it's about 2 gallons of water with a sponge. That helps. I also have a humidifier set up here. Oh, I can't point. There you go. Up here. And it has its own little snake that runs into the box and keeps everything at a specific humidity. But that's the GQF 1500. I think they call it maybe the Sportsman, um, but it has all the digital controls like in decimal increments for temperature, and I think that that's pretty helpful. um, so that's what I like. That thing has been beautiful. It's been solid. It's quiet. It works great. Um, that those other that like the other one that I had, it just I'll go out there and it's just it's constantly doing this, and so
yeah,
we've had much more consistent hatchings with that, especially if you get into um, this is the maybe cart before the horse, but as you keep going with your journey, it's likely somebody here listening to this may get into insemination in the future. And so if you are deliberately going in to raise virgins to hatch as insemination material, then you want to know that I've got 40 or 60 or 120 virgins all hatching out in this 1 hour window, so you're not going through and chasing and checking and is this ready and is that ready. So consistency, just it lends to efficiency, and that's a big deal for us.
thank you. I got one more question in the chat, but I think I'd like to end with that because it's about your killing Newt Apagard. So
Oh
maybe we
man,
can end with that story. I'd
yeah,
actually like to go back to the non-grafting method where you talked about crowding a colony. Are there any management strategies you're doing actively to crowd it, or are you just not doing your regular spring swarm management to let it crowd itself?
yeah, great question. So crowding is really like just giving them no room. They feel like we have got no room to grow, so now we're going to start swarming. Now, I think a little folks are a little apprehensive and they get a little scared when you start saying things like crowding or forcing them to swarm. But what you have to consider is the bees don't just, the sun doesn't come up today and they say, we're swarming tomorrow. They can abscond and they can do that. And those are for different reasons. But when bees go in through that entire swarm cycle, what I see is their behavior and their productivity, their direction of work changes inside the colony, and it goes through some very specific phases where you will see, yes, they're brooding up and they're making a lot of brood, but then you'll start to notice in the areas where the typically would be mostly would be honey, um, they will start this you'll start seeing much larger cells being formed, or you'll start to see an effort put into laying drones. So the drones happen, in my opinion, the drones happen first. You will see them prepping the next generation with drones first. When you start to see that happen, then you'll start to see some of those queen cells. Now, you might see what I would call those fake cups at first, which are kind of like those fat, squatty light bulb queen cells that you see them make that they do nothing with. It's so interesting. It's almost as though they said, okay, today is learn how to make a queen cell day because Grandma B, she's not going to be with us in 2 more weeks, and so she's going to teach you everything that she knows that she learned from her grandma. And so it's like they've got a learning session where they put these fake cells on that they do nothing with. You'll typically see those first, then you'll see an effort placed into making a lot more drones in the colony, and then when you start seeing those about ripe and those almost ready, you'll start to see the real queen cells actually come on that they're laying egg that she's laying an egg into. They're nurturing, they're feeding, they're drawing those cells out. That is when it's prime time. That's when it's time to start making those moves, when you start crowding them out. Because what you're doing is we're playing to the bees' strengths that they know all the nutrition and all the timing. When the bees get this hive mind that it's time to swarm, the biological mechanics of that means it is perfect timing for you to be grafting into or to be harvesting those queen cells because they're in that mode of swarming. So that's a beautiful opportunity to either use that for genetic material for breeders or just to make those splits, but you can also quail that back some. You can go in and you can harvest those queen cells, knock them all down, give them a little bit more room, some fresh foundation, and they can go back to business as usual. That is a strategy that we have used for many, many years. Is it's kind of like with kids, right? When it's their idea to do something, most of the time they'll do it and they'll do it great, right? But especially like I love my kids, and they're all, and as they all get older, they're all a little bit different. But as the girls get a little bit older, if it's their idea, they are all about it. If dad says something, that is so uncool, dad, right? But if their friend says the same exact thing, like they are all about it, and it's like the thing, right? The same thing with with working the honeybees is when it's their idea, when it's in their perfect timing, things are beautiful. Let's play to those strengths rather than trying to force bee. If you're trying to force a colony of bees who they're not even interested in making a lot of brood, like they just don't have it together yet, right? And you try to say, okay, can you take these 15 or 30 grafted cups and turn them into queen cells? They're going to be like, no, we can't because we don't have any pollen or bee bread. We're trying to just get by day to day. So timing and weather and dearth, all of those things kind of play into it. But that's what forcing or crowding a colony is just getting them to that point where they want to swarm on their own. We can play to those strengths there.
I love how you work with nature and kind of just help them along their way, whether it be the season or the bees biology. Greg, will you finish with your story? I've heard it before. Will we tell the cautionary tale of
Absolutely.
dosing your nukes with Apogard?
Yep. It is let me say this, it is way easier. Our farm, Nature's Image Farm, the idea is it's way we prefer to work with nature rather than against it, with all the things that we do. And so as we were, sometimes again goes back to the proverb, pride comes before a fall. We thought we were really doing good this one year. I mean, had all the queen orders out. Everything was great. We didn't need any more colonies. right? And so we put that last round, as you saw in that photo, where it was, stands of nukes. That yard grew out. I think it was 160 colonies, is what that yard was. Everything was beautiful. There were 5 frame deeps. Some were 5 deep with a 5 deep on top. Some was a 5 frame deep with a 5 frame medium on th- different sizes, right? They were beautiful, they were healthy, and I thought I want to make sure that I put a treatment on going into this mid to late fall season, just to make sure we do one little round of a cleanup. So there's a the devil is in the details with a lot of these treatments. And when you are getting out, even if you're operating within the approved or directed parameters, there is still an awful lot of variables and nuance with that. When you get into treating nukes with Apogard, boy, it is really challenging. So what we did is we cut the dosage back, because what's interesting is, if you've ever used Apogard, if you use the little foil square and you pull the corner off, like the instructions for that at the time, the instructions on that or the instructions online, they don't say anything about nukes for smaller colonies, right? It's a 50-gram dose and you reapply in 10 days. Okay. Well, we, run more enough colonies to where we were buying Apogard by those buckets, those little green pails. And the green pail has a little instruction sheet that, peels off, and it's this big long thing. And you start reading it and it says, for nucleus colonies or overwintering colonies, like small colonies, that you can back the dosage off and do, like, I think it was 12 grams or whatever that it was. So we said, okay, cool, we'll do that. So we went through and treated everything all the same way, all at the same time, all with Apogard. And I was really proud of myself. I thought, man, this is going to be great. I told my wife, I said, Susie, I mean, if all goes right, I mean, that we're going to have an extra, probably at least an extra 120 or 130 uh, nukes to sell. Now you take 130 nukes at $200 a piece. That's a considerable amount of income. And so I thought everything was fine. Went back to go check on those colonies. And during that late fall, we had a little bit of a temperature spike where it got into like the mid 80s for a day. And guess what happened? It was, no, I have never seen something so horrific. What mostly happened, which is kind of the bane of the beekeeper existence, is it forced 90% of those colonies to abscond. Completely left the colonies, gone, done. Nobody's home, right? I can tell you, I didn't catch 140 swarms that spring. So all those colonies that could have lived in a 5 frame box in the wintertime, there's no way in the world that they left and went into a tree and made it anywhere. They had no comb, they had no brood, they had no food, they had nothing. So it was a total and complete loss. On some of the other ones, it was almost as though it was, sometimes if you put bees into a really poor situation, for lack of better words, they will start puking, and it creates this big, wet, nasty mass of bees. And we saw that too. There was just too much thymol vapor in these colonies, even though it was dosed all the way back to the minimum size dosing for a nucleus colony. It was too much. So what did I learn since then? Is that you got to be careful with anything that you are putting on the colonies, and you got to make sure that you're looking ahead in the forecast, and whatever your threshold number is, have a buffer, have a pad on that. So while some folks are comfortable using formic at 85 or 90, I dial it back and look at my forecast. If I'm going to be above 83 or so, or 82, I won't touch it. Right. So we have to create our own little buffers and pads when we're doing anything, because that's very uncomfortable. So now here I am, Brian, and I was just telling Susie, that's gonna, what is it? That's like an extra, I don't know, 20 some grand. The springs, maybe we might be looking. We could probably invest in this and that. And I'm already thinking, okay, well, we could put some new fence up here and get the cows some gates here and all these things. And I'm telling her all these things. I'm literally um, counting my chickens before they were hatched, and then all that happens, and I have to say, hey, you know that nuke yard that you finally convinced me to treat these bees and do a really good job with it. Well, I screwed it up and they're all gone. And so that's a that's a fun fun dinner time conversation, but that's beekeeping. And if there's been any time then right now, I think we're all seeing that. Bob Benny, said it best in one of his talks, is that we've had these cycles and severe loss going back to 1900, big ups and downs. That is beekeeping. That's bee farming. Is there can be it's super big highs and super low lows, and you just hope to be somewhere in between. But that's bee farming. That's where we're at. I've learned a lot of things the hard way, and I try my best to relay and pass those on to folks. Um, Not to create a bulletproof system for them, but at least they don't have to make the same mistakes the same way that I made them. They're going to go off and make some new ones. They can come back and share with their clubs and their communities and things like that. And I think that's how we all move forward and learn from each other. And I think hopefully we learn something from this current scenario. But if I've learned anything, is there's no absolutes in beekeeping. You can't get comfortable. Um, and it's beekeeping, it's bee farming. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And so, on that note, Brian, I'm going to thank you guys so much for having me here, for the invitation to share what I love so much. My favorite aspects about the actual art of beekeeping is queen rearing. I absolutely love to do that. So, thanks again. And Brian, as always, I just like to remind folks to be the lighthouse and be the change that you want to see in this world. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. As you kind of wrap your talk back into the world that we're living in, being a sustainable beekeeper, part of that means being able to recover your losses or to raise your own queen. So if you had a tough year, if you had a tough winter, hopefully you walked away with some skills or some ideas to add to your skill set, to your toolbox to help you raise queens a little bit better. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for all your time. Appreciate you as always. You can contact Greg if you need to at nature'simagefarm@gmail.com. Your website, Greg, is nature'simagefarm.com. Is that correct?
You got it.
And then you can find Greg like he has there on YouTube as well, and Facebook and Instagram, and maybe still TikTok. We don't know. Greg, thanks again. Really appreciate
You
it. Thank
betcha.
you, Colorado beekeepers. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Brian.
Thank you.